Okay, so get this right. What if, in a board game, your failures, like on a fishing trip, didn't just mean you went home empty-handed, but
Hmm.
uh, they actually like followed you throughout the game, like, genuine regret.
Ooh, interesting.
So today we're going to deep dive into Deep Regrets, an unfortunate fishing board game.
Okay.
You guys really wanted to understand this game, and we're gonna pull out the core mechanics and all the really fun, cool, intriguing details.
I love it when a game takes a simple concept, like fishing, and adds this dark kind of consequence layer to it. So it's not just about scoring points, but it's about this growing sense of regret that can really mess up your game.
Exactly. So what is Deep Regrets? Well, it's a dice rolling card drawing game where you are anglers, you're trying to catch fish. But here's the twist. You've got to avoid piling up too much regret. Because regret, in this game, it impacts your sanity, it's tracked as ocean madness, and ultimately impacts your score at the end of the game. And our mission is to give you guys a clear understanding of how this game works and what makes it unique.
Yeah, this is a really neat concept in game design. Using this negative emotion like regret as a central mechanic, it really flips the script on,
Yeah.
typical gameplay where you're always striving for the positive. Now you have to kind of manage the negative, and that can lead to some really interesting choices for players.
Definitely. So let's get into the setup. First, focusing on you, the player. So each player gets an angler board. And as Judson explained, these angler boards are mechanically identical. You've got spots for your trophies, your big fish. You've got a tracker for your fish bucks. That's the currency of the game. You've got areas for your fresh and spent dice and spaces for your rods and reels. And the only thing that sets apart these angler boards is the artwork, which Judson described as equally scary looking, and the name of the angler.
I love it when a game uses artwork to tell a story. It really adds to the immersive feeling.
Definitely. Okay, so in a two-player game, each player chooses a character. Then you start with 0 fish bucks, 3-player colored dice in your spent area, a can of worms card, we'll get to that later, a lifeboat card, a boat token to put out on the sea, and your madness marker starts at 0 on the ocean madness tracker. Oh, and each player also gets 2-player reference cards to keep you on track. And to determine the first player, well, whoever had the most regrettable day recently takes this anchor token, and that's the starting player.
That's such a fun way to decide the starting player. It sets the tone of the game right away.
Absolutely. So you've got your angler setup. Now let's look at the port setup. The port board goes at the end of the table, and the day marker starts on Monday. However, if you want to play a shorter game, Judson explained that you can start on Tuesday.
Okay.
So next we've got the tackle dice. Those are the pale wooden ones, and they all go into this bag. Then you've got these regret cards. And these little cards, they have a regret value on the back. 0, 1, 2, or 3. 0 for, like, trivial regret. 3 for really deep shame. And there's a bit of flavor text on each card describing what this regrettable event was. You shuffle these up and deal out 10 cards to each player to form the regret supply deck. So in a two-player game, that's 20 cards just sitting there of potential woe. And these stay right next to the port board.
The regret cards sound like they add so much personality to the game. It's not just about the numerical value, but also the story behind each regret.
Exactly. And then you have your shopping district, which consists of your rod cards, your reel cards, and your supply item cards. Each of these gets shuffled, and they go into their designated shop area on the board. You've also got a life preserver token, a double-sided fish coin, which again, we'll get to that later, and this red almond-shaped die, all for different in-game effects. And then finally, at the port, you have your Ocean Madness tracker, which is where your player cubes go, starting at 0. And this is important because the Ocean Madness tracker modifies two things. First, how much your fish are worth when you sell them. And second, your maximum number of fresh dice you can have, which starts at 4.
That's a really clever way to tie the regret mechanic into the core gameplay. Your mental state essentially directly affects your ability to earn money and to fish effectively.
Exactly. So Judson mentioned that as you accumulate these regret cards, your madness level on the tracker will shift up or down. So for instance, if you have between 1 and 3 regret cards, your fair fish or worse 1 more, your foul fish 1 less, and your maximum number of fresh dice goes up to 5. But if you really go off the deep end and get 13 or more regret cards, things get interesting. You get a discount at the port shops, your fair fish become worth 2 less, your foul fish worth 2 more, and you can have a whopping 8 fresh dice.
So it sounds like there's a potential benefit to being a little bit, on the mad side,
Mhm.
but obviously some downsides as well.
For sure. Okay, so that's the port setup. Now, let's set up the C. So the C board goes right next to the port board. You take the small dink cards, shuffle those, and put them in their dink area on the C board. Then you have the depth cards, level 1, level 2, level 3. Each level gets its own shuffle deck of 13 cards, making 3 little piles. There's also a space on the C board for your discarded fish cards, the graveyard, if you will.
Right.
And on the left-hand side of the C board is where your boat tokens start at depth 1.
So the fact that there are different depth levels suggests that the deeper you go, the more interesting, the more challenging, maybe the more valuable the fish.
That seems to be the implication. So let's talk about fish cards. These are like the stars of the show, and understanding these cards is really key to being successful in this game. So in the top left corner, you see the sell and score value of the fish. Now this value can change depending on your madness level, but it never goes below 0. So Judson gave the example of a hammerhead shark. It's got a value of 5. If your madness level gives you a +1 to fair fish, suddenly that hammerhead is worth 6 fish bucks. Next to the value is the name of the fish, of course. And in the top right corner, you have the difficulty to catch. This tells you how many dice you need to catch that fish. Then below that, you've got its size: large, small, middling, and whether it's fair or foul. And this distinction of fair or foul is super important, especially when you're selling your fish.
I like how your mental state, your madness level, it affects the value of the fish differently depending on if they're fair or foul. That adds another layer of strategy to the game.
Absolutely. Then there's the sell effect, which is written in red under foul. And basically every single foul fish you sell earns you 1 regret card. So you get that quick cash, but there's a mental cost. Now, here's where things get interesting with fish cards. They can have these abilities listed at the bottom. There are 4 types: persistent, reveal, catch, and eat. Persistent abilities are kind of like passive abilities that are active as long as the fish is face up. Reveal abilities trigger immediately when you reveal the fish. For example, Judson mentioned the scrat card, which if you reveal it and fail to catch it, you have to give it to the player on your right.
Oof, that's brutal.
Yeah, that's rough. Then you have catch abilities. These trigger when you successfully catch the fish. So for example, the hammerhead shark requires you to discard 1 small fish from your hand, if you have one. Finally, eat abilities. These you can use on your turn by discarding the fish to gain whatever benefit the card says.
These abilities add a lot of variety and fun to the game. It's not just about catching the most valuable fish. Some fish might be worth catching for their abilities alone.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just fish you might find out there. You might stumble upon a treasure chest, which when you catch it, and I'm guessing it has a difficulty rating, its when caught ability triggers immediately. So Judson gave an example where, you discard 3 regret cards, gain 8 fish bucks, draw 3 supply cards, and then you discard the chest.
That's a nice little bonus. Adds a little excitement to the game.
Right. Now, we talked about regret cards a bit, but let's really dig in here. So they have values from 0 to 3, reflecting the severity of your, regret. But those values, they only matter at the very end of the game for scoring. What matters during the game is the number of regret cards you have, because that determines your madness level on the Ocean Madness Tracker. So if you have 4 to 6 regret cards, your cube moves to that 4 to 6 range on the tracker, which, like we talked about, modifies the value of fish and your maximum number of fresh dice. And as you gain and lose regret cards, your madness level will go up and down.
So it's like a constant push and pull between your actions and your mental state.
Exactly. Now let's get into the gameplay. Each day is divided into 4 phases. First, we have phase 1, start. You actually skip this phase on day 1. Then you have phase 2, refresh, or as Judson called it, mustering courage. Then there's phase 3, declaration, which you also skip on day 1. And finally, phase 4, main actions.
So it kind of makes sense that you skip the first 2 phases on day 1 because you want to get right into the fishing and the exploring.
For sure. So let's look at phase 2, refresh, mustering courage. In this phase, each player takes all their spent dice and can choose to add any number of their fresh dice. You roll them all, and then you get to choose dice to put back in your fresh pool up to your maximum limit, which remember starts at 4. Any dice you don't choose go back to the spent pool. Now, the player with the highest total from their fresh dice after rolling gets this life preserver token, and they can give it to another player. If there's a tie, the player earlier in the turn order gets it.
Okay.
And this life preserver is pretty cool because you can use it once per day to reduce the cost of fishing by 2 fish bucks, or you can use it at the port to reduce the cost of an item by 2 fish bucks.
Yeah.
And once you use it, you give it back.
So refresh is more than just rolling dice. It's also a way to kind of strategically use this life preserver token.
Definitely. Now we skip phase 3, declaration on day 1, so let's jump into phase 4, main actions. And since you start at sea, we're going to focus on sea actions. So you have 2 main options on your turn at sea. You can attempt to fish, or if things are really bad, you can abandon ship.
Abandon ship, that sounds pretty desperate.
It does, right? But let's look at fishing first. So to even attempt to fish, you need at least 1 fresh die. Doesn't matter what rods or reels or special abilities you have, you got to have 1 fresh die. Then you cast. So you choose one of the 3 shaws, as Judson calls them. They're the face-down stacks of fish cards at your current depth or any depth shallower than you. If the shaw you choose has no fish face up, you flip over the top card. Now first, you check for any reveal abilities on that fish. If there are any, you resolve them immediately. Then you look at the difficulty number in the top right corner. To catch the fish, you have to spend fresh dice from your pool with the total value equal to or greater than that difficulty. You don't get any change back. Once you've spent those dice, you get to add the fish to your hand and then immediately resolve any catch abilities the fish might have.
So there's a clear process here. You cast, you reveal the fish, you deal with any reveal abilities, and then you decide whether to spend dice to catch it.
Exactly. Now, if you decide not to catch the fish, maybe it's too difficult, maybe the abilities are bad, whatever, you have to spend 1 fresh die of any value, discard it to spent, and then you draw a dink card. You keep that dink card secret. Now, the fish you decided to pass on stays face up in the shaw until the next day. You only get 1 attempt to catch a fish per turn. If the fish has a 0 cost to catch, or if some item or ability reduces the cost to 0, you don't have to spend any dice to catch it. You still need to have that 1 fresh die to initiate the whole fishing process, though.
That makes sense, yeah. You still have to, make the effort to catch it.
Right. There's also this concept of overfishing. If you catch the last fish in a shaw, you have to draw a regret card, and after that, nobody can fish from that shaw. And if somehow the entire sea is empty of fish, the game ends immediately. So you have to be mindful of the fish population, I guess.
Yeah, so there's kind of a balance there. You want to catch fish, but you don't want to deplete the entire sea.
Exactly. Okay, now let's talk about abandoning ship. This is something you can only do once per game. If you're at sea and you have your lifeboat card face up, you can use your turn to flip it over, and you immediately return to port. Your boat token goes back to the port board, and you can only take port actions for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Now, the downside is that abandoning ship gives you 10 regret points at the end of the game. However, it doesn't give you any actual regret cards. So it doesn't affect your madness level during the game. It's just a penalty at the end.
So it's like a really costly escape route, but sometimes you just got to do it.
Yeah, sometimes it's your only option. Now, while you're at sea, there are a few free actions you can take that don't end your turn. One of these is dropping sinkers. You spend 1 die of any value to move down 1 depth level. You can actually do this multiple times per turn, but at the start of the next day, your boat automatically goes back to depth 1. Another free action is using your can of worms card. So before you reveal a fish from a shaw, you can use this card to secretly look at the top card, and then you can decide whether to put it back on top or on the bottom.
So you're cheating a little bit, getting a glimpse of what's to come.
Exactly. You can also eat fish. If you have a fish card with a bite ability, you discard that fish to gain the effect. And of course, if you have the life preserver, you can use it as a free action once per day to reduce the fishing cost by 2. Finally, you can use any relevant bink items you might have or activate the abilities of any rods or reels you have equipped if they apply to the current fishing turn.
So there's a lot of tactical options at sea. It's not just about fishing. You can combine those free actions to, improve your chances.
For sure. Now, eventually, you will return to port. This happens when you move your boat token back to the port board. And as soon as you get to port, there are a couple of things that happen automatically. First, if you used your can of worms card, you refresh it. Maybe you can use it again. You also refresh your dice. This is basically the same as the mustering courage roll from phase 2.
Yeah.
You gather all your spent dice, add any fresh dice, roll them, and then put up to your maximum number back in your fresh pool. You can also optionally look at one of your regret cards and discard it.
That's a crucial decision right there. Do you want to get rid of that regret now, or do you risk holding on to it?
Definitely. Okay, so then you can go shopping. You've got the rod shop, the reel shop, and the supply shop. All of these shops work the same way. You can spend 1 fish buck to draw the top card from the deck. You can spend 3 fish bucks to draw the top 3 cards, keep 1, and put the other 2 back on the bottom. Or you can spend 5 fish bucks to draw 5, keep 2, and put the other 3 back on the bottom. Any item cards you discard, including dink cards, go back under their respective item decks. Only fish cards go to the fish graveyard.
Right.
And it's worth noting that rods and reels you buy don't take effect immediately. They only take effect at the start of your next turn at sea, which makes small fish cost 1 less to catch.
Okay.
And then you have reels like the stoplatch, which lets you set 1 fresh die to its highest value once per day.
So you're essentially investing your fish bucks in better equipment to hopefully catch more fish.
Right. Then you have this dice shop, which is a bit unique. Here you spend fish bucks to get these tackle dice, the pale wooden ones. 1 fish buck for 1 die, 3 for 2, 5 for 3. When you buy these dice, you roll them immediately, and you can add them to your fresh pool up to your maximum. Any extra dice go to the spent pool. Now, the key difference here is that when you spend a tackle die for an action, it goes back into the bag instead of your spent pool. However, if a game effect sends a tackle die to your spent pool without you actively spending it, it stays there.
So the tackle dice are kind of like a renewable resource. That's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Another key port action is selling your fish. You can sell any number of fish from your hand, but you can't get more than 10 fish bucks total from selling. Remember, fair fish are worth their base value, but that can be modified by your madness level, and foul fish are also modified by your madness level. But the catch is that every foul fish you sell gives you 1 regret card.
So again, there's a trade-off, right? The foul fish might be easier to catch, but they come with that mental baggage.
Exactly. Finally, at the port, you can mount your fish. You can choose up to 3 fish from your hand and put them in the empty slots on your angler board. Each slot can hold 1 fish, and once it's mounted, it's there for good. Unless, of course, something happens at the end of the game, which we'll talk about. These mounted fish will score you points at the end. Their value is modified by your madness level and then multiplied by the mount multiplier on the board, which can be 2 or 3. But the player with the most regret at the end of the game has to discard one of their mounted fish.
That's tough. You could lose your best fish just because of your regret level.
It really shows you the importance of managing those regret cards. There are also a couple of free actions you can do at port. You can use the Life Preserver to reduce your shopping cost by 2 fish bucks, and you can use any relevant dink cards you might have. So once you've done everything you want at sea or at port, you can pass your turn. That means you're done with Phase 4 for the day. Now, the first player to pass, and also each time they get skipped in the turn order because other players are still doing stuff, they get a reward. They can choose to draw a dink card or discard 1 regret card.
So there's an incentive to kind of be efficient with your actions.
Definitely. But there's a limit to that. Once all but 1 player have passed, the remaining player gets 2 more turns, and then the day ends, and they don't get any bonus rewards. Okay, so we talked about regret cards throughout the game. But just to recap, if you need to draw a regret card, you take the top card from the regret supply deck, look at it, and put it face down. If the supply deck is empty, you draw from the discard pile. And if both are empty, you take a random regret card from another player.
Yikes, that's rough.
Not a good situation. If you get to discard a regret card, you choose one and put it face down in the discard pile. And if multiple players have to draw or discard regret cards at the same time, you do it in turn order, starting with the first player. So the game ends on the final day once everyone has passed. Now, this is where the real consequences come in. First, each player adds up all their regret values on their cards. Don't forget that 10 regret point penalty for abandoning ship. Then, the player, or players, with the most regret have to discard one of their mounted fish. In a 2-player game, they discard their lowest value fish after adjusting for badness. In a game with 3 or more players, they discard their highest value fish.
That's just mean. You could lose your best fish at the very last second.
It really emphasizes that regret has real consequences in this game.
It does.
Okay, so then you calculate your final score. All the fish in your hand are worth their base value, modified by your badness level. Your whited fish are worth their base value, modified by madness, and then multiplied by the mount multiplier. And finally, every 2 fish bucks you have is worth 1 point. The player with the highest score wins. Ties are broken by regret value. than the number of regret cards, and then it's just a tie.
It sounds like every single decision you make in this game has a ripple effect. It could affect your final score in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's recap everything. We covered setting up your player area, setting up the port, exploring the sea, understanding the impact of those regret cards, the flow of a day in the game, from refreshing your dice to taking actions at sea and at port, and finally, that dramatic endgame scoring. You guys should now have a really good understanding of how to fish, upgrade your gear, keep your sanity in check, and ultimately win the game.
What I find most interesting about this game is how it takes these familiar game mechanics, the dice rolling, the card drawing, and combines them with this unique, almost punishing regret system. It makes your failures, your mistakes, even your greed, it makes them really matter. And not just in a thematic sense, but it actually impacts your ability to succeed within the game world.
Exactly, and figuring out when to risk catching those foul fish for a quick buck, knowing the regret cost, figuring out the right time to maybe abandon ship and take that 10-point penalty, that constant balance between short-term gains and long-term consequences, it sounds like it would create some really memorable moments in the game.
It's really a masterclass in game design, how they've managed to balance the risk and the reward with this psychological pressure of regret. You're not just trying to fish efficiently, you're trying to manage your in-game emotional state, essentially.
For sure. So has our deep dive into deep regrets made you want to try it out?